I want to talk about the most common mistake hunters make during the pre-rut. The pre-rut is not necessarily an exact date, but it's pretty close, from starting here to going there. It's important that I define when the pre-rut occurs. And that's when the first does start becoming receptive, which is much earlier than a lot of hunters think, until about 25% of the does are receptive. There's just enough of that scent in the air that bucks are starting to change from that food cover pattern to seeking receptive does. No matter where you hunt, the rut is going to be along a bell-shaped curve. Now the height and distribution of that curve depends on where you are and the sex ratio of that herd. When I was early on in my research career, I was doing some work in way northern New York where it was illegal to harvest does except for a 3-day archery season. Goodness, it was crazy. There were does everywhere. And that rut, based on conception dates, we pulled fetuses out of deer and looked at actual conception date data, was spread out over months. That's a real issue in the north because those early born fawns are gonna hit when there's still snow on the ground and there was almost no chance of survival. We know a lot about the pre-rut now as bunches of biologists throughout the whitetails range are looking at fetal data and have built really solid databases. Today, we're talking about hunting based on real biology and not an individual observation. Which brings me to one of the biggest mistakes I see hunters making. We need to follow the biology and what's known about whitetails versus one observation. Just here at the Proving Grounds last week, Daniel was just hunting a couple ridges over from me, and he saw a couple bucks pestering a doe, very typical of pre-rut behavior. Looked like that doe might have been receptive. Where I was, nothing was happening. During the pre-rut, and more so as that pre-rut progresses to the rut, the action's going to be where a receptive doe is. And the rest of the time, deer are going about their business as normal, but there are some exceptions. Visits to scrapes are going to increase during the pre-rut. Scrapes are communication hubs. Hey, I'm here. What status are you? How healthy are you? Are you receptive? That's a scrape. It's just like that old bulletin board at a church. Hey, I've got a washing machine for sale. Or if you're old enough like me to remember the old telephone booth where everyone goes to communicate with someone else. Scrapes are a point of communication. There's many parts of the scrape, the ground portion, the overhanging limb, and deer use those in different ways. More important than that, we're talking about the pre-rut. Deer are going to be walking more and more. Bucks are going to be taking more steps each day based on numerous GPS collars placed on deer. So those travel corridors become really important, maybe even more so than the food sources as that pre-rut progresses. I know when I say travel corridors, that leaves the bulk of hunters kind of in the cold because we think of travel corridors in ag country, little narrow bottlenecks, little patches of timber. It can be tough to find that travel corridor like here at the Proving Grounds where the bulk of the land is mainly timbered. You go from Maine down to Florida, over to East Texas, all up and down the Appalachians, southern part of Ohio. All those areas are primarily timbered and not ag. So now you're looking at saddles or low spot and ridges, elevator ridges, a ridge that gets you from the top to the bottom easier than some of the real steep ridges. You have to look at topographic features to find those travel corridors and not just a satellite image looking at a narrow band of cover between a couple of ag fields. The pre-rut is very dynamic. When you look at that slope of the pre-rut and rut, that pre-rut is changing rapidly. So you can't just get honed into a stand or blind and necessarily set there the entire pre-rut period. And you don't want to go based on one observation. Oh man, I saw a buck chasing a doe, it's on. No, you got to trust the biology. Always trust the biology. So each day during this time of year gets a little bit more intense, and you need to know, are there acorns falling? Or the farmer harvested local crop? All these things determine where bucks and does, which portion of their home range are going to be using. You got to stay tuned in. The pre-rut is a very exciting time, and part of that excitement is things are changing rapidly. And you've got to stay tuned in as a serious hunter to those changes to be able to know where to hunt. Not only where to hunt, but how you approach, hunt, and exit. Remember, alerted deer are very difficult to harvest. So as these resources are changing, your approach strategy may change. It may be that deer were not in this area pre-daylight, but all of a sudden a farmer harvested a crop over here, and now they're focused on a food source here, and they're in there as you're trying to go to your stand. It takes a lot of skill to really hunt the pre-rut effectively.
Growing Deer is brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's. Also by Green Cover Food Plots, Winchester, PH Outdoors, Black Widow Bows, Moultrie, Steel, Fleet Outdoor Apparel, Morel Targets, Fourth Arrow, Soil Pro Outdoors, Scorpion Venom Archery, Case IH Tractors, Burris Optics, and Redneck Hunting Blinds.
Let's go back to scrapes a second. The pre-rut is the best time to hunt over scrapes. That's when bucks use scrapes the most. I did my master's degree on scrape behavior, and many have followed up on that. But a lot of scrape behavior happens at night. Just finding a big old car hood scrape doesn't mean you need to hang a stand right there. It may be happening at night. We use our Moultrie cameras to kind of monitor that. Not only which bucks are our bucks using that scrape, how many a day, is it at night? And the more excitement around that scrape, the more intense the pre-rut, and we know bucks are traveling more. Oftentimes, I don't just hunt a scrape. I want a scrape that's in, conjunction with an acorn tree dropping acorns, or a food plot that I know, or a travel corridor I know that amps up that time of year. I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket. It's not just a scrape. Think about where that deer is morning, noon, and night. Where are they bedded? Where are they coming from? Where are they going to? And find scrapes in those areas, and that will make scrape hunting much more successful. Just getting a trail camera picture or seeing a single buck in a scrape doesn't mean scrapes are hot. You want more than one observation before you justify spending those limited hunting hours we all have. I've got multiple Moultries out watching multiple scrapes. That tells me, are bucks really using scrapes? Are they backing off scrapes? We're getting close to the rut where there's so much sin out there they're just chasing does, or they haven't warmed up yet. You need to really put multiple data points together to make good decisions where to spend, again, those limited hunting hours. Are the scrapes by the field edge really hot just because deer spend a lot of time there? That tends to be a pre-rut thing. Once you get into pre-rut, seems like the hottest scrapes are in those travel zones where bucks are moving a lot, looking for a receptive dose. Scrapes and rubs go hand in hand. So just finding a fresh rub, especially on the field edge, just tells me a buck stood there one time. I don't know if they're coming back or not. But finding a rub line that's fresh, that's being worked, often is associated with a scrape line, and that can mark a travel corridor. It's not that you're hunting an individual rub, you're hunting where bucks are traveling over and over again. We're looking for an area that deer are using repeatedly during daylight hours. The best hunters I know, going way back to Roger Rothhauer, Gene Winslow, those guys that were doing a bunch of this before information was widely published about deer biology, had figured it out. They had a plan, they stuck to the plan, and they tagged a lot of good bucks. Sticking to what we know now about deer biology will make you a better hunter in the field. But it's really important during the pre-rut when things are changing really rapidly, probably more rapidly in a deer's life than any other time throughout the year, is being willing to adapt and follow the sign and what your cameras are telling you and hunt accordingly. I think that's why I like to go back and reread some of those early books from really successful hunters, because deer biology has not changed over time. That's just like reading the Bible, God's Word. His will for our lives have not changed over time, and His direction on how to live a good life has never changed. It never has, and it never will. And I encourage each of you to literally seek the Creator's will for your life and apply it daily. Thanks for watching Growing Deer.